So let me read you this quote real quick. And then you can tell me, does this sound like a cool thing to even start the show with?
Okay.
This is Thomas Merton. What can we gain by sailing to the moon if we are not able to cross the abyss that separates us from ourselves? This is the most important of all voyages of discovery. And without it, all the rest are not only useless, but disastrous.
He's a 7-story mountain guy, Thomas Merton.
Who is he?
He wrote the 7-story mountain.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I totally know this guy. That's a great quote. I'm so glad you read that. When we were in college, I was going through this whole discernment process about, my relationship with God and what does that look like. And I had a buddy who was on staff as an RA with me, and he was planning on going into the seminary. And he said, dude, whatever you do, you have to read this book. This is the only book you need, and it will help you ask the right questions, and then you'll decide. And you'll know definitively at the end of this discernment process, because Merton's really good. And he was totally right. Read the book, didn't go into the seminary. That was me. It made the choice very easy. Yes.
Wow.
Okay. Hey.
All right. How about if we start with like the greeting and we say, Pete, we have a lot of things to talk about today, as you know.
Yeah, I think we've already started. Who are we kidding? It's an Afterthoughts, Dodge.
Oh, I haven't started recording now.
Yeah, it's already done.
Well, I'm gonna record anyway, Pete.
Yeah, no, you definitely need to record. It's a podcast, for crying out loud.
That quote jumped out. Are you sure we can't start over?
I'm really sure. That was too good. It was too natural. It's too natural. It's too good. Too authentic. No, we're done. It's cemented.
Let me just tell any of you all people out there, if you ever work with Pete, you got to be real careful about when you start your recording and when he, more importantly, starts his recording, because you never know what he's going to actually just print. And you don't really have that much say over it, I'm telling you. You think you do, but you don't.
I've got 10 minutes of gold on my end. You'll never even know. You'll never even know until you hear the final episode, the final recording.
Does anyone understand? I hate him. God.
Yeah.
He always does this to me. 10
you know
minutes
what?
Of gold.
I quit.
What?
That's it. I'm done. Our friendship is over. I can't podcast with this level of amateur. Intern, bring me my blue M&Ms.
At all times, Big Brother is listening. That's really what's going on here.
You didn't hear the Zoom lady?
That.
She said, we are being recorded. Dodge. It was written in the stars. The Zoom lady already said it. Okay, tell me about the quote.
You were being recorded. Well, I'm going to read it again. This is beautiful, because now I want people to hear this, really. What can we gain by sailing to the moon if we are not able to cross the abyss that separates us from ourselves? This is the most important of all voyages of discovery, and without it, all the rest are not only useless, but disastrous. I feel like that really nails this show, man.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Right? Because like every single guest at some level is saying, like, the problem is we're disconnected from ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that all these other voyages of discovery are not only useless, but disastrous. We get ourselves into so much trouble trying to get away from ourselves, away from this experience we can't accept.
And as we learned from our last guest, really the only solution is to die. And, how lucky are you if you come back?
Exactly.
Then you'll figure it out. Fixes everything.
Yeah. That fixes everything. So you and I have been having a hell of a conversation for a couple of weeks about 2, 3, 4, pretty much since Bruce almost, since Bruce Grayson and that episode about what are we doing next? I had a really interesting experience coming out of that show where I felt on one level that was strangely quiet and unfamiliar to me, finished. Like there was a weird feeling of completion.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't figure out what that was about. How much is that, well, I just did do a whole episode on near-death experiences, or maybe it was just that we had finished season 2 and I was exhausted or something.
Mm-hmm.
But it stayed with me. We started talking about, like, do we keep going?
Yeah.
And a part of what I've been sitting with on my, mind and heart for a long time is, on the one hand, I freaking love this.
Mm-hmm.
I love you. I love the work you're doing for this show. You make this whole thing so much better. This would be totally impossible without you. Let's just name that right from the start. I mean, like, none of this would have happened without Pete. This was not happening with anyone else. But I've loved our guests. I've loved a lot of this process. I've loved the coming out of shows feeling really energized and feeling a whole new level of awareness. Even poring over the books in free time can be amazing. And it's freaking demanding. Even if you've got a superstar, making the whole show part happen, just making the interviews happen is a lot of work.
It is. It is a lot of work. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a gamble. And as an aside, part of it is, we tried to make a go of the membership part of it. Right? Like, I imagine if you're a paying member here and you're a supporter, you're sitting there saying, but wait a minute, I've been supporting you. It would have been a much easier conversation to have if, frankly, we had some more of you. But, we didn't quite get there. We didn't get over the hump of all of our time and expense of the show. And I don't mean like just expense, like service, but intellectual expense, emotional expense of the show. Being covered so that we could, frankly, make enough so that we could make choices in favor of the show. That's a real practical part of it.
Yep. Well, making sure that first, my production team, dear as you are paid for all of your time. And then eventually that we get enough over that, even beyond that hump, that I can do a little less of what I do professionally. So I have some more hours in the week to read all these books.
Right.
Think up these people and come up with great questions and know what the heck my outline actually says on my iPad. Yeah. All those things. And a big piece of why we didn't get there has nothing to do with the wonderful loyalty of the folks who have supported us, because I've gotten so much good feedback and people have been, both monthly and annual patrons. And it's been really so gratifying and touching to me. But it's also been that I haven't had enough time between my practice and my family and my household and my life, and then preparing for all these interviews to promote this show the way I need to. Yeah. And I started looking at season 3 and thinking, that's not going to change. Like, I'm not coming up with more time. Yeah. And to really jump into the next piece, which was really promoting this properly, I was just like, this isn't fair to Pete and Andy. I can't keep that part of it up fast enough. But there was really also a deeper piece. And of course, I'm toggling back and forth because I'm still really wanting to do this.
Yeah.
But it was that quieter voice that was going, so wait, why would I even feel done?
Well, yeah, that's Bruce's fault.
That's Bruce's fault. We just
100%.
For sure.
Yeah, it's his fault. And I think both of us were like, well, how do you top that? Like, he just said, here's the existential question of the universe. And I've been researching it for like 50 years. And I don't know what you guys are going to add. Good luck.
Yeah. And the interview, it was a bit of a mic drop experience. Like, it literally, he was hitting the next thing on my outline all by himself. Like, everything segued. I mean, it was like, that's why we do this show. So it's been really interesting kind of falling back on so much wisdom I've, been fortunate enough to gain from these many guests over this whole year. That's gotten me kind of sitting in my process, from Dave's Givens of life to the many guests who taught us different ways to engage one's experience. But I kept just trying to say, like, so what if I don't separate from myself here? Like, what if I stay close to me? So I finally end up calling up Ted
Klontz, dear friend of the show.
Dear friend of the show, our only 2-time guest. He would have been a 27-time guest if we'd gone as many years as we certainly had material out there in the world to cover. And he asked me a really interesting question. He just listened in his quiet way. And then he said, so I'm curious, Dodge, have you ever had an experience of just feeling complete, feeling finished, and not going into angst about it?
Yeah, that's a great question for Dodge.
And talked and round, and I realized, no, actually, no, never once. Not in a relationship, not in a... Yeah. I mean, there's just nothing that has come to an ending where I just felt perfect. That's where I want to stop. And then didn't go into, but what about? And the place I go, which I think lots out there will relate to, is, yeah, but what about Pete? What about our members? What about our listeners? What about the people who count on this show and write to me every week about it? You know, what about all our guests? Does this dishonor that, like, everybody else's experience? And I immediately, abandon any thought of, but what do I know deep down? And so I said, I basically just fell all over my words. And he was like, that's kind of what I thought.
Yeah.
And that's most of us.
Yeah.
And then he said something really interesting. And he said, in our culture, we tend to pathologize a sense of completion. We call it quitting or laziness. Some will point to ADD and say we're just terrible at finishing things.
Yeah.
Or we'll say we ran out of ideas, or we got selfish, or right. Like, we've found all these ways to say it's not okay when things are going really well and have this bright future, like this show certainly has. I mean, we could go forever on this subject. Yeah. And he was like, and then he told me 2 stories about places in his life where things were at the very peak and he realized he felt done and felt terrible about it. And both times his wife, Margie, said, what if you trust yourself?
What if you were just finished?
Yeah. And in this case, finished a lot sooner than I thought.
Yeah.
Well,
so I process this stuff very differently than you. I think we've run into that together over the last couple of weeks. Listening, awesome. Y'all, we have gotten together to record this episode twice now before this, and both times we ended up talking about this process because for me, when we had that first conversation about Bruce and about the nature of this conversation and are we really done, I walked away from that saying, okay, I guess we're done. Like, I guess that's all we had to say about it. And I got to be heartsick about it for a little while. But the way I process is, okay, let's start cleaning up. Like, let's break down the set and start putting things back in the closet. And we got to paint the floors and the walls for the next show that comes up. And I was kind of ready. And each week we'd come back and Dodge would say something like, so I've really been thinking about whether or not we should quit. I'm like, dude, I've already put the mic stands away. You can't keep swinging at me like this. And I think it makes me really like celebrate Ted's perspective on this, because I think for me, this was a way, like putting away that, like the show and sort of going into archive mode for the show is a way to duck feeling sad about it and feeling like incomplete and feeling like, wait a minute, I don't know that we've finished saying everything we need to say. Because like you, I look at you and your life and your time, and I don't see anything that's going to change for season 3 based on what I know about you. Like, our process is our process. If we accept that as given, that's table stakes, then what else could we possibly do? And so it's hard for me to step back and say, God, I don't like feeling heartsick about, not doing the show with you, about not being a part of this contribution to, the world. Like, it is a wonderful experience for me. And I think the last 2 weeks, I've just been trying so hard not to think about it. Like, things are busy in other areas, and I just use that as a reason not to, perseverate, because that's what I normally would do,
it makes me think of something Jerry Campbell said to me a lot of years ago. that everybody out there needs to know. Clients of mine have often heard me say it before, that he just said, Dodge, people tend to be fundamentally oriented toward questions or fundamentally oriented toward answers.
Mm-hmm.
And both are awesome. They're both great ways to be. They both have got huge gifts and they both have got real challenges. And he pointed at me and he said, you'd be a real good example of a guy who never stops asking the question.
Yeah.
Which makes it really hard to arrive at an answer.
Yes. Just like for me, I answer the question and move on. Like,
yes. Once you've got the answer, you don't ask the question again. You're done. Yep. Yeah. Done. Even if, like, at some point, there's something healthy about going back to, like, wait, did we ask the question long enough? Or do I need to ask it again finally after this much time or whatever? And they're both great ways to be, and they both have got, things that are easy and hard about them.
But I think, for you and I think we exist maybe precariously at the extremes of those. Right?
Yeah, I would totally agree.
Yeah. And that
I think it's part of why we love each other so much. I get a lot of, like, you help me remember. It's okay to come up with an answer and then just make it the right one later. Just go with it. It's going to be all right.
And you remind me that, maybe arriving at an answer at like 30% sort of processing is too early. Like, maybe you could get to 60, 70, 80%. And that would be a smarter way to make a choice. Because for me,
it doesn't have to be
I could
170% like I would do. Like, we don't have to reprocess and reprocess.
Right. You could think a little bit about it. Like, you don't have to just,
you're right.
Just a little.
I think some of what got to me in the near-death experience, reading and preparing and interviewing, was I realized, like, if I go through a near-death experience and I look back on my life and I haven't done the work I know I'm supposed to do in the world around the gray sequence, I'm really not going to be happy.
Yeah.
For those out there who don't know what that is, the gray sequence is a really interesting, simple, but powerful technique I developed years ago at the request of a client, really, that is a wonderful way to work with one's material. And it is almost a perfect summary of all of our guests at the same time, literally. Like, it, in one technique, kind of captures everything these folks have been saying for a year. And it's a really neat way to work with one's own stuff. And for therapists, coaches, and others, it's a really neat way to help somebody else work with their stuff. And some part of me was like, I don't have space for that in my life right now. I feel like we've done a great job answering this question of what's the weird thing about the paradox around change. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to have to let go of something I absolutely love to pick that up if I want to make space for it in my world.
Yeah.
But I got to do it.
Well, and honestly, like, for me, I'm back pocketing opportunity because of that, which is like, I feel like we're taking this show and archiving it, right? But I feel like this does not change the opportunity for contribution in a new way as you make more room for the gray sequence and developing that in your life. Because I'm a grateful recipient of the gray sequence multiple times over my life, and I find it is important, and I think there is more to talk about, a lot more to talk about.
And I have to say, I'm pretty clear about one thing. We work really well together.
Yeah.
I have enjoyed the hell out of this and have loved the product. And so, I'm sure we're going to find cool ways to work together again in the future. Mm-hmm. This time, me not coming on as a total novice.
Yeah, you're a professional podcaster now. Look at you.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm a and one thing I've learned is Big Brother's always listening.
Always
so watch
listening.
What you say,
yeah, the mic is always hot. The mic is always hot. So, you are like a hair's breadth away from pulling like a Naked Gun style Frank Drebin hot mic at the urinal moment. Like, really, that could be you. I just want everybody to know.
Everybody gotta watch it. The mic is hot. So I've been looking back a bunch on. I thought I'd started out just looking back on season 2, but then I realized, man, we're recapping the whole show.
Yeah, right.
And the first thing I did was to go back and listen to our summary of season 1. And I gotta say, and I guess I did say, and you probably have already recorded this and included it at the beginning of the show, that was a really neat episode. I love that.
Yeah.
That came out incredibly well. And it reminded me that this project, like my dream about this wasn't just that we'd interview a bunch of people and I'd get some cool things, but that they would gel. They'd come together in some neat ways. And season 1 really captures that well as we talk about the pilot episode with my brother, Ben, and then Dave Rico and Ted Klontz, Carlene Britton, and then Nikki Kinzer comes on and talks to us about ADHD, Suman Chaudhry and Linda Odom, and then for members only, Kratos and Yangwei comes on as sort of our one guest in that season, coming to just tell a personal story, not as a change agent, but an example of an extraordinary life of change. And as I look back on that now, rather than going through kind of everybody one at a time, which that episode did really well, I'm noticing the 2 themes that really jump out from that are the power of acceptance and the power of observation. If you think about kind of the way they really work together, right? Everybody's talking about both of them, but some one more or than the other. And you know what I forgot in my list is Samsung Yangwei.
I was wondering if you were going to come back to
police violence. Yeah. So Sam really nails the observation piece. He's looking at police violence in this country and saying this has never just been cataloged and truly observed, studied. What happens if we just organize the data and begin to present that back to people like a mirror? And he's showing some really fascinating change comes as a result of it. But Suman's doing the same thing with just what if we observe our reactivity?
Yeah.
And Linda, what if we observe our dreams?
Yeah.
What do they bring to us, right? And everybody from Nikki about ADHD or Carlene in this paradoxical theory of change, just acceptance of self. Ted of others, Dave of the givens of life, Ben of one's kind of feelings and experience. We get to see a lot about the, as Carl Rogers puts it, the curious paradox is that when I can accept myself as I am, then I can change. So that's season 1.
I like the way you put that because I think that really clearly it sort of presents the challenges that I feel like I've been dealing with like all my life, which is first, can you truly sit and be present, right? And that's the observe piece. Like, can I really just note what's going on without always thinking 5 minutes ahead or 5 minutes behind, right? I'm either thinking what's next or what did I miss? And what does it mean to just truly be here? And that leads directly to this acceptance piece, which whatever it is that I'm here now doing, I have to be here now doing. And I might as I guess it's dismissive to say I might as well accept it, but it's the embracing it as whatever it is in front of me, not cataloging an emotional response to something, but just being present with it as an event, as an element, as a relationship, whatever it is. And it's really easy and sort of instinctive to fall back into the pattern of I am not a thing if I am not emotionally reacting to a thing. And I think that leads into season 2. I think for me, the strongest like episode, or I should say pair of episodes for me was Victoria Castle on the trance of scarcity and the cycle of abundance, and being able to sort of turn that on its ear. And she, a number of my interactions with her since, when she stops and just processes, and you can tell she's just doing exactly that. She's being present in the moment about how she feels, how her body exists right now, how she is emotionally reacting emotionally, and what does that mean for decisions she has to make. And I've been trying to be much more like aspirationally Victoria since that conversation. Just like, hey, I know I'm being presented with this. Maybe it's an opportunity. Maybe it's a crisis, whatever it is. But I need to stop. And as you have reflected many times, I need to think more slowly. That's a powerful thing for me.
It's got to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Victoria introduced a really neat idea to these ideas of acceptance and observation in just presenting an idea of what if a whole lot of what resists change is trance-like.
Yeah.
And she talks mostly about the trance of scarcity, but I think it really points to a much larger issue. And she defines that trance of scarcity as the unexamined predisposition to believe that lack, struggle, and separation are our defining reality. That's a really interesting way to put that. And trances, kind of by their nature, are exclusive. So they hyper-focus on one element of the experience and then exile everything that doesn't fit that one element.
Right.
Trances are by nature the opposite of what Jerry Campbell came to tell us about his definition of mental health, the tolerance and hardiness for mixed contradictory feeling and thought.
A celebration of cognitive dissonance.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Finally calling that a good thing.
Yeah. It doesn't have to mean you're broken just because your brain is trying to adapt to competing ideas. And
I paused on Victoria's stuff too as kind of a cool lens to look at all the other guests of season 2. Like Lance Bennett came to talk about politics and climate change and, how those have changed over time and how they might change in the future. And like, if he's not describing a trance, I mean, an entire cultural trance, I don't know what he's talking about, right? Like we are in a hell of a trance on both subjects.
Right.
And having a hard time waking up.
Yeah.
Yep. I saw Lynn McTaggart talking about the breaking of this trance that would say our thoughts don't have any power, that they're meaningless and internal, and kind of pointing to the surprising reality of our interconnection. That when people intend for others, they begin to experience something very powerful for themselves.
Right.
The Claunces are certainly talking about trance-like behavior with money.
Oh,
right.
So, and that was another one that seems like, and if you look at the just sort of list of all the episodes that we did, that one seems, I guess, on its surface, the different one, right? But it is dealing with all of these exact, same issues, the same issues of the trance of scarcity and acquisition, and of old lenses, old tapes with how we handle money and how we relate to money, and the trying to overcome the muscle memory that just takes hold when we deal with long-term financial planning and hoarding instincts based on fear. And I think their approach to it, I think, was really great. I learned a lot from that experience.
The ultimate trance that almost the entire world is in, that never gets examined, is that one that people wake up from when they have an NDE.
Yeah.
Which is the trance of isolation, that we are entirely separate beings, right? And do you remember those life review things? I don't know how well we conveyed this in our show and Afterthoughts, but in the book, it becomes really apparent in some of these that maybe in the exercise we covered it, those quotes I shared.
The readings.
Yeah. You can't take an action in this life without it affecting you. We are absolutely interconnected.
Right.
And on the other side of it, you get to feel all of it. Not just the I am Dodge Ray, but I'm also Pete Wright.
Yeah, right.
And everything I'm doing is
so
affecting you.
Right.
You should be. See, I can just promote myself right there.
You have something to look forward to.
I'm actually Pete. That's something to look forward to. I'm going to get to feel like Pete. This is going to be a good day for me. What else stood out to you about season 2? Like, was there more stuff that jumped?
I was super excited about Lance Bennett because he's the guy who just sort of speaks my language a little bit. And I think, coming to a lot of these conversations, I am, I think, more of a novice. Like, this is language that you truck in every day. And so for me, Lance, and to a similar extent, Suman, or not Suman, Sam Sinyangwe, like that's a language that I speak. And so it was really interesting in the case of Lance to think about like how all of these concepts apply directly to the work that he's doing too. And I think a lot of people forget it who are in the, social sciences, political sciences, like they forget just how human these political decisions and political trends are, right? You lose track of the humanity when you aren't able to approach through the lens of scarcity and abundance, through intention, through, as Jerry says, through that sort of tension between love and fear. When's the last time you heard a politician talk about love and fear? I actually think we get a little bit of it. I was listening to the Biden speech from yesterday as we record this, and he starts to dabble in this, and I couldn't help but think there's a guy who kind of has made that transition through great personal loss over his lifetime and career to being more comfortable using the language that we have been using this over the last 2 seasons of this show, and that's a really special. It's a really special place to be when you see it out there in a space that is so typically just this intransigent, this like concretized field of ignorance and division cynicism. and cynicism. So I think that's really special to hear how Lance brings some of that language to his own ideology, his own worldview.
Amazing, absolutely. I found myself thinking a lot about Wei Wu Wei. For those who haven't heard it or don't remember, that idea that comes out of Taoism, as Bill Martin talked with us about, it's that idea of doing without doing. The idea of kind of allowing an action to come from oneself rather than forcing one. And that the results are really very different when we do it that way. Yeah.
Bill Martin was a special guy too. Like I feel like I didn't say enough about Bill Martin because that was a really wonderful conversation. And I think it's a guy who spent his career making the cognitively impossible sound easy and approachable. There's so much about the Tao Te Ching that is, I think, a struggle when you sit down and start to process like we normally process things in Western culture. And it's so easy to say, that's hard, maybe not, delete, when what he has done is provide the lens through which we can see something easy. And the lessons of just sort of letting go, giving yourself permission to be free, to do without doing. That was really impactful for me.
I reached out to a highly recommended ontological coach recently just to start a different kind of work. I've been doing lots of therapy for years, but I thought it'd be really neat to work with somebody from kind of a different change agent's point of view. Yeah. And she was asking me sort of like, do you have a sense of an overarching goal? Like, do you know where you really want to go? And what popped out made her like crack up. Like she just burst out laughing. And what I said was, after years of rowing my ass off, I finally want to learn how to sail. Right?
That's really good.
It's like that, that Taoist idea that if we can tap into an invisible but palpable force, in this case, wind, and add a little bit of skill and willingness to stop rowing, that force can take us anywhere we want to go. Yeah. But most of us are so busy breaking our backs with the damn oars in the water, sure that this has to be hard, that we don't for a moment wonder if maybe there's an easier way.
I don't even know if most of us have even gotten to the water yet, man. Like, there's part of me that thinks, okay, like, you have a fancy Tesla, but why'd you take the transmission out and run with your feet like the Flintstones? Like, that's kind of the level of hard. Like, I don't even know if we are getting to the water right now.
If we just use the water like this is sort of the, we're trying to get across the lake, from here to where we want to be.
Yeah.
Or here where to where we think we should be. Most of us are rowing. So here'd be a great example. I spent weeks torturing myself, deconstructing a knowing that I had from the beginning because it scared me.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't like to be impulsive. It scares the hell out of me. Arriving at an answer too soon terrifies me. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Perseverating indefinitely terrifies you, and I do know why. Because it sucks.
Yeah.
I live there.
Yeah.
But so I got there, and I was able to kind of make note of it. But then I went into, oh no, what if this is the wrong thing? What is this? How does this affect everyone else? Do I really want? There's a lot to lose. God, I was going to feel sad. I already feel sad. Right. And anyway, I got stuck there, and I went straight into effort. Now I got to do the math. Effort. I got to just make this decision. I got to make the right decision. I got to really try. I'm going to really, really work at this. Right. And I got my oars out, and I started rowing like crazy. Right. Back and forth, from one dock to the next, pretty much going absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
Nowhere. Until it occurred to me, I don't even believe in this as a way to get anywhere. There isn't anything to decide. I say all the time to clients, what if we stop deciding and just discover?
Yeah.
So then I was interested in, what if I discover? So then I really worked hard at discovering. I could tell you how far that went. Nowhere. And then I realized, oh, wait, I'm still in effort. I'm still rowing. There's no way in this at all.
Yeah.
So then I sat down and I meditated and I said, I am going to trust that I already know what's best for absolutely everybody.
Okay.
And that will bubble up to my conscious mind soon. And it's going to feel so good. Tearfully laugh out loud, wonderful, when I finally am like, God, there it is. I knew all along.
Mm-hmm.
And I honestly had no idea what the answer was going to be. But I just decided I'm going to trust that's already there and it's coming and I don't have to try at all. It will just arrive. And then I get an email out of nowhere from somebody that had owed me an email for long enough that I'd forgotten that I'd ever even written to her. And she was somebody I'd worked with a long time ago. It doesn't even matter what the medium was. But she was like, hey, so sorry I never wrote you back. And I realized, oh, that reading a long time ago had kind of a key to me understanding myself better, and that would have a lot to do with what I needed. So I called her up. She gave me a really cool Sufi prayer. And the Sufi prayer was one you say right before you go to sleep, asking for a dream of guidance. And then I wake up with this dream that helps me know I got to talk to Charles and I got to talk to Ted.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, everything started getting really clear.
Yeah.
But it ended up being like this really cool sort of path through all sorts of the different folks we've worked with, even Linda Odom in her dreams, you know?
Yeah, right.
I guess I share all that to say, like, there's a way to allow that is so much more efficient than the thing I do when I'm in full of effort.
It's another one that's like, okay, like I could sit and think about that. But it kind of hurts because I realize just what a reflection that is for how I operate. Maybe on the opposite end of the perseveration scale most of the time, but it's because I discover the act of discovery is just as elusive for me because I'm spending so little time in effort and so much time in just deciding, right?
Yeah.
Like, I still don't really discover. Like, I think back and could litigate all of the decisions that I've made that weren't discovery based, that weren't like letting things unfold because I pushed too hard to just get to a resolution. And I wager that's equally difficult to process.
It's a really popular strategy. I mean, you push through to the decision and then you burn all evidence of ambivalence, right?
Totally burn the evidence. That's right. That's right.
Right.
Hannibal crossing the Alps. It's just
right. It's a book burning ceremony on the volumes of doubt you had about this decision just get scorched.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really easy way to do it.
That's right.
It's not an easy way to do it. It's a very popular way to do it, is what I mean to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I look back on the whole show, I was really wanting to see if I could understand, like, what is this change process? And we've really focused on the mysterious aspects, the paradoxical parts, because the straight up change part, the conscious, willful effort part seems to be pretty well covered. And you know who really captured the two together beautifully for me? Was Jerry. So he comes in saying, there's nothing wrong with solving problems. That's great. It just doesn't always work.
Yeah.
You can't always do the math or try harder, row and row and row and get anywhere.
Yeah.
Some problems are meant to dissolve. It's not better. Sometimes dissolving doesn't work quite the way solving does. Sometimes, in fact, there's an issue you can just fix. But if you don't have both of them in your tool belt, like both hammer and screwdriver, you're going to have a problem.
Well, and what's so great about Jerry, though, is that he brings that sort of the journey to it all. That it doesn't matter how many tools you have in your tool belt if you haven't or you are not able to process what came before and what will come after. Like, life is a journey, and we are integrated pieces. And he trucks out Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey and these sort of how we adapt to our threshold guardians, right? And how we confront them and how we move through them. And I think that's just a really special way. And he was the find, focus, follow, right? Like that. Yeah. That's a mantra.
That's a dissolving process.
Yeah, that's a dissolving process. And I think I think you're right. I mean, and to have him as late as we did in the overall sort of arc of the show, I think he makes a really great prequel to the NDE episode with Bruce. Like that, if you're looking for a way to create and manifest the kind of change that people have experienced through near-death experiences that you and I said we're jealous of, right? You really don't have to look that far than Jerry Campbell, who's sort of outlining, here's how you can start making that change in your own life.
The dissolving he talks about kind of brings me back to Bill Martin and Taoism and that idea of mutual arising opposites. When we're into our solving stuff, we tend to create crests of waves that then create troughs, right? Like we bring in one energy and the world will necessarily bring in its opposite somewhere.
Yeah.
Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. This is the mutual arising of opposites piece. And so the dissolving process it's where we kind of let go of all of that striving and pushing and creating and kind of wave making. Which you see also suggested by everybody else.
Yeah.
Like my brother, and talking about, being with feelings that are inevitable. Or Dave talking about the basic givens of life. When you stop fighting with them and resisting them, you stop giving them so much power.
Yeah.
There's kind of quieter theme, though, that also emerges from that idea that really was where I got to with this NDE episode. And I'm going to see if I can capture this without sounding trite, because words totally fail on this. But I think it was finally the deep knowing that I contacted in talking with Ted. So one problem with this mutual arising of opposites is if you fight with your experience, you feed it. You make it bigger. But there's also a really nice way you can use it, which is that you tend to get what you give. Of all the people who've, joined us and shown that, in some ways the most beautiful is Kratos and Samson Yangwei's father, who tells this story growing up in the most extreme poverty of Africa. He's in Botswana. He is a child without shoes who's supporting his whole family by, catching fish and buying loose fruit and selling it for a little tiny bit more to tourists so that he can bring money home to his family. And he's like 10. Mm-hmm. And along comes this little European boy, British boy, who's got an attendant with him, a guardian, and the little guy wants to fish. And so he drops a giant hook in the water and a big piece of bait, and the fish come along and steal it. And he gets more and more angry. And he can't understand why Credo is catching so many fish, and he gets mad at him. He says, "You're catching all the fish, that's why I can't catch any." And so he kicks him. And Credo laughs at him and says, "Hey, it's not that. You just have the wrong size hook. I have one more." And he gives him like his last fish hook. This kid who has nothing, who depends on these hooks, gives him his last hook, and the kid catches his first fish of his life. And he's so thrilled, he runs all the way home, jumps up and down, comes running back, wants to catch more fish, and does so, and they become friends. And this ends up completely changing Credo's life.
Yeah.
In ways that bring him ultimately all the way to America. It's an absolutely incredible story. But what an amazing moment of, he showed love to this little brat.
Yeah.
And it opened up the loving...
him. He's a kicker.
Exactly. He shows generosity to this little brat, and the entire universe opens its generosity in return.
Yeah.
Just impossible grace comes his way. But there are many others who've shown the same thing. Look at what Lance is advocating in politics, or what Lynn is showing with science, that literally if you sit down and you send love and goodwill towards somebody else, you begin to experience it in your life. Provably, that if you send healing to others, you begin to experience healing. It's fascinating.
Well, and Sam too, but about the police violence, just presenting the data and giving it to the world, to these police forces around the country, is an act of goodwill, right? It's an act of grace and generosity coming from a person who has every right to feel completely targeted just because of what he looks like. And it is a massive act of grace to present this data in a way that is made approachable by people who likely do not want to hear it, or do want to hear it and don't know what to do about it, right?
And already paying dividends for his whole community and certainly in his life. Yeah. And then, of course, Bruce just talking about all the ways that shows up in people's lives and their near-death experiences and life reviews.
Pretty special.
It's really huge. There was this moment on Sunday where I realized this long-time motto that's been part of the grace sequence, which is sort of bringing one's some sensation in the body, more love, not less, has become sort of a life motto for me. When I'm stuck in any given situation, I find I rarely go wrong if I just go with more love, not less. Mm-hmm. But man, did that hit home in such a sweet way. As Ted and I were talking, I was just like, that's what I want to do. That's what this show's been about. That's what I want to do next. More and more of. I want to bring this technique back out into the world in a way that helps as many people as possible. It's what works.
It's been a pretty good ride. Maybe too short.
It's been a hell of a good ride.
But it's been a good ride.
Yeah.
These episodes aren't going anywhere. They're still on the site. And you can still access them and use them and meditate with them and learn from them. I feel like there's a lot of evergreen stuff in here. Still has a lot of headroom to help people.
We have a number of listeners who will come back and say, man, it wasn't until the fourth time I heard that one with so-and-so that it really opened up for me. And I'm glad these will all be available for a long time. I'm going to be sending lots of folks back to say, hey, do you mind going and looking up this one episode with, let's say, Jerry or Lynn or Ben or whatever? Yep. And see what you can find there. And who knows how this is going to circle back. We know we're stopping for now. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know if this will evolve, and when there's more time in our lives and we've got another kind of way to approach it or another way to fund it or who knows what, we may come back and do more work in the podcast realm or somewhere else. I don't know.
I hope so, because I kind of live here. in the podcast realm.
And you live here so freaking beautifully. I just want to say a huge public thanks for your ancient friendship with me. It feels like it's been my entire life, though I guess it started somewhere in my young 20s. It's been all of them and many lifetimes more, I think. But also just your skill set is amazing, Pete.
Thank you.
One old friend wrote back and said, "This show is awesome. You did a great job, but that Pete guy, he's a national treasure."
That's so kind.
I mean, you've made these shows sound cool and move smoothly, and have just brought so much charm and personality, but really also like company, It's been relational instead of solitary, and that's the only way I want to be in the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at the risk of like coming off in a way that I don't really intend to, it is a selfish experience for me too, because like I've always valued the way you approach the world and the way you teach and the way you see and live and love. And I just learned so much by listening to you conduct these interviews, and it's been incredibly valuable to me personally. So it does, it's not a complete act of grace on my part to be a part of this. Like I am a student as ever, and it's been a real joy. So I will sit here and raise a glass to whatever project comes next for us.
Me too, my friend.
Practically, for those who are listening now, I think what we're going to, I don't think you and I have talked about this, but I think what we're going to do is go ahead and make everything public. The early release and members only episodes, as this thing goes into the archives, I don't see any reason to keep those locked away.
Nah, we'll just open them up to everybody, especially because I think once you turn off the member feed, I'm not sure they'd be able to access them. And I want to make sure, especially members who've been so kind in supporting us, can get back to any part of this they want for as long as they like.
And so the public feed, if you search, Apple Podcasts or Pocket Casts or Google Podcast, whatever it is that you use for your podcast listening, the public episodes that are there will now be inclusive of all of the members-only episodes, including the Credo episode. Why not?
Absolutely.
There's a 4.5-hour epic journey. You can listen to Credo and then go watch Shogun.
It's a really long but wonderful conversation for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. So just anywhere you get your podcast, just go look up the Change Paradox and you'll find all the episodes there. I thought maybe we'd end with just something sort of experiential. I wanted to read a story that comes out of Victoria's book, The Trance of Scarcity, that gets to this last piece we were talking about. This last piece of giving being really where all the value is. Does that sound okay as a place to wrap up for today?
Absolutely.
She writes, "A wise woman was traveling in the mountains when she came upon a beautiful clear stream. Thirsty, she cupped her hand, reached in, and brought the water to her mouth. After she had drunk, she noticed a precious stone in the palm of her hand. She held it high and it glittered in the sun. Delighted, she tucked the treasure into her bag. The next day, the wise woman met a hungry fellow traveler, and without hesitating, she opened her bag to share what food she had. Immediately, the traveler caught sight of the precious stone and asked the woman to give it to him. She did so without the slightest hesitation. The traveler left, rejoicing in his good fortune. This stone was surely worth enough money to provide a lifetime of security to him. But only a few days later, he came back, his brow furrowed, and returned the stone to the wise woman. I've been thinking, he said. I know how valuable this stone surely must be, but I brought it back to trade for something even more precious. Please give me what you already have within you that enabled you to so freely give me the stone."
Ugh.
Yes.
Man. Love you, B. Thanks for this.
That's wisdom right there.
Yeah.
I love you too, Pete. Thank you for everything. For all of you out there who've listened, whether for a short time or for a long time, we love you too.
Thanks for showing up. Thanks for doing the work.
You are gonna find your place, child. Of that much I know, I'm sure. Keep on laughing at the rain, I guess. Isn't that the place to start? Someday you will be stronger than you are now, but you will not know everything. And when the water's spilling over the bow, you'll still have me in the wings. You gotta get up to get down, kid. You gotta get down to get up again. You gotta get up to get down, kid. You gotta get down to get up again. Your mother like she's made of gold. After all, she brought you here. And if you're lost, go see the ocean. It will always help you steer. Someday you will be stronger than you are now, but you will not know everything. When the water's spilling over the bow, you'll still have me in the wings. You gotta get up to get down, kid. You gotta get down to get up again. You gotta get up to get down, kid. You gotta get down to get up again. Someday I will be weaker than I am now, and I still won't know everything. But when I'm passing up and over the clouds, I hope that you'll have learned from me. Someday you will be stronger than you are now, but you will not know everything. When the water's spilling over the bow, you'll still have me in the wings. You gotta get up to get down, kid. You gotta get down to get up again. You gotta get up to get down, kid. You gotta get down to get up again. You gotta get up to get down, kid. You gotta get down to get up again. You gotta get up to get down, kid. Hey, you gotta get down to